We are learning about the 5 circumstantial advantages in the words of my perfect teacher, and the fourth one is, the Buddha's teachings can be followed. Although we now have the advantages, a Buddha has appeared and has expounded the Dharma, and his teachings still exist, the key is the fourth advantage, that we must follow the Buddha's teachings. If you have enough renunciation and other favorable conditions, you may take ordination. If you do not, you should uphold all or at least part of the 5 lay precepts. On this basis, you hear, contemplate, and meditate on the Dharma, which qualifies you as a Buddhist. If you don't enter the Dharma, even if the Dharma still exists, you cannot receive the doctrine of transmission and realization. If you don't receive the doctrine, the immense wisdom and great compassion in the Dharma have no possibility to infiltrate you. The problem is similar to this. There is a good neighborhood school where teachers teach every day, and an orphan wanting to go to this school will be admitted. However, it's possible the orphan doesn't want education and prefers to always wander outside. A learned person might feel sorry for the orphan's lack of education, whereas the orphan might think the opposite, that he is living a free and happy life. Similarly, if you don't follow the Dharma, even if Buddhism is flourishing, you get no benefit from it. There are many non-Buddhists around monastics and lay practitioners nowadays. Compared to this enormously big crowd of people who are lost in life, we are indeed very fortunate to have the opportunity in this very life to know what to do and what not to do. If we do not embark on the path of the Dharma, no matter how thriving the Dharma may be, it will not bring us any benefit. This is just as the rising sun can hardly have any impact on a blind man, even though it illuminates the entire world, and just as the waters of a large lake cannot quench the thirst of a traveler who has reached its shore but chooses not to drink from them. Although we have the opportunity in this life to have entered the Dharma, millions of people around us, despite their high education, social status, and wealth, are still aimlessly wandering in samsara life after life. Therefore, we should generate great aspiration and try our very best to help them. Even if helping one person to generate compassion or renunciation for just 1 second, we should still devote all our effort to doing it. Of course, such an aspiration is not something we do only once. It requires a long-term commitment. With such an aspiration, sometimes favorable conditions that allow us to benefit others may unexpectedly arise. Thus, wherever you go or live, you can always help beings with the wisdom of the Dharma and bring fortunate beings to enter the Dharma through various methods. For these beings, the benefits of bringing the Dharma to others are inconceivable. Bringing status and wealth to them is not a true benefit, whereas bringing Dharma to them so they can avoid vices and engage in virtue is of great meaning for their present and future lives. Therefore, it is very important to lead ourselves and others to enter the Dharma. There are 2 kinds of Buddhists. One kind is the pseudo-Buddhist, and the other is the true Buddhist, the pseudo-Buddhist. Dharma as protection against fears. Some of you may enter the Dharma not in pursuit of liberation, but for the sake of antidoting negative life situations, such as a relationship breakup, severe illness, lack of basic necessities of life, disasters, or feeling utterly lost. Or it is out of fear of falling into the realms of hell, hungry ghosts, or animals in the next life after you get to know the sufferings in the 3 lower realms through Buddhist scriptures. In the first case, it is out of concern for present life adversity, and in the second, it is out of fear of future suffering. Since your motivation is not for liberation, even if you've entered the Dharma and received a refuge certificate from a temple or a guru, the Dharma you receive is just used to protect you against fears, and you are not yet on the right path. Some countries proclaim they have millions or tens of millions of Buddhist citizens, But I wonder whether some of these Buddhists took refuge only for the sake of seeking protection from fears. If such is the case, they can only be regarded as pseudo-Buddhists. I have noticed many taxi drivers hang a pendant of Avalokiteshvara or Buddha Shakyamuni in their cars. So sometimes I ask the taxi driver, "Why are you hanging this?" He often replies, "Because I'm afraid of having a car accident. This pendant can protect me." Sometimes I also ask, "Are you Buddhist?" "Yes," he replies. "Why did you take refuge in Buddhism?" "Because a fortune teller told me I wouldn't live long, so I took refuge for living longer." In the short run, this is of course a skillful way for him to enter the Dharma, but ultimately seeking protection is not the right reason for taking refuge. Dharma as quest for excellence. The pursuit of the Dharma solely for the purpose of getting food, clothing, and so on in this life, or to secure a favorable rebirth as a celestial being or a human in the next life, is called Dharma as quest for excellence. As such, even if you've entered the Dharma, you are not yet on the right path. Nevertheless, Buddha Shakyamuni was not against temporary quests for excellence, because for beings with strong desires, one can first fulfill their desires, then eventually guide them onto the path of liberation. The Vimalakirti Sutra says, they intentionally become courtesans in order to win men over, and having caught them with the hook of desire, they establish them in the Buddha. However, many people are hooked by desires but haven't yet connected with the Buddha's wisdom throughout their entire lives. This phenomenon can be seen everywhere and is not uncommon at all. Many people enter the Dharma for the sake of finding peace and safety. I know a person who always refuses to utilize the Dharma for liberation. He told me, "Dear teacher, I prioritize the peace and safety of my family. I have 2 kids. I hope the older one marries well and the younger one studies well at university. I hope I am safe and sound as well. I hope my wife, who is in bad shape, becomes healthier. I hope my parents-in-law stop their quarrels and that my parents are well. Other than these, I ask for nothing. Namo Amitabha." I told him, "It is fine that you wish for these things, but still you have to think about liberation, which is much more important." But he responded, No. Being safe and sound is enough for me. Liberation is beyond my quest." People who share this same attitude of mind haven't really taken refuge in Buddhism. The true Buddhist. Only those who truly understand that the whole of samsara has no meaning and the 6 realms are as terrifying as a burning house, a land of demons, or a forest of swords, and who strive to seek liberation for themselves and others by embracing Buddhism are the true Buddhists. We should all reflect on this and check whether we are true Buddhists. With the Guru's blessing and kindness, many people have gained good intellectual understanding, although their experiential understanding varies. Of the 6 realms, no one wants rebirth in the 3 lower realms, the hells, the pretas, and the animals. Meanwhile, we shouldn't pursue rebirth in the 3 higher realms, the human, the asuras, and the gods either. A person once told me, if I were to be reborn in the future, I will do so and so. Hearing this, I got a bit annoyed and asked him, "You have been studying Dharma for many years. How can you still desire a better worldly life?" He immediately clarified, No, I don't mean that. I definitely aspire to attain liberation. I just mean, in case I cannot attain enlightenment in this life, what I wish to do in a future life is, it's just an in case. Worldly people often say, if there were to be an afterlife, I would. Afterlife is merely an assumption for them. We practitioners should think this way. If I fail to attain liberation in this life, I must continue my practice in my future life or lives. The aspiration to be reborn in the pure realm of Sukhavati says, to attain the pure realm of Sukhavati from the inescapable ocean of samsara is like being liberated from a prison of great evil. May I not look back towards samsara. Those who think this way can be regarded as true Buddhists. Otherwise, if they only desire the 8 worldly concerns but not liberation, then they are definitely not true Buddhists, even if they are monastics who wear kasayas, shave their heads, live in monasteries, and use the offerings of the faithful, let alone householders. Of course, it is difficult for an ordinary person to always maintain renunciation and never let it regress, but we should at least occasionally wish for liberation and understand there is nothing worth pursuing in samsara. If we've never thought about being liberated from samsara since we entered the Dharma, then we're definitely not a true Buddhist. How can a monastic who is not even a true Buddhist be considered a monastic? How can a lay practitioner who is not even a true Buddhist be considered a lay practitioner? Someone might regard themselves as not only a monastic, but also a practitioner with a high state of realization. Let's not talk about their state of realization for now. It's worth checking first whether this person is qualified as a Buddhist. Therefore, it is of great significance to study the text of the words of my perfect teacher. If we don't know what's been covered above, we may appear to be very diligent, but what we are doing is not Buddhist in essence. Therefore, we shouldn't just glance over the text. Instead, we should ponder it and think it over, word by word, line by line, while reading the text, and examine ourselves accordingly. By doing so, we can not only pinpoint our own deficiencies, but also understand what to do in the future and regard the text as a beacon guiding us on the path. Some people wonder, I have a higher education, so do I still need to study the basic teachings of the words of my perfect teacher? In fact, a secular degree has little to do with attaining the states of practice described in the words of my perfect teacher. If you have faith and diligence, the mentioned states will arise in our mind. If you don't have faith and diligence, however knowledgeable or prestigious you are, the Dharma can hardly resonate with your mind. Therefore, I suggest you carefully reflect on this. This text prompts you to examine your internal mind rather than the external world. There are those who are kind-hearted toward others. Some people have taken refuge and received a refuge certificate from a temple or have officially joined a Buddhist study group, so they claim their Buddhist identity by saying, for example, I took refuge at 7 a.m. on June 25. Perhaps so, but without being accepted by a qualified teacher, they still know little about the Dharma. In this case, however long it has been since they took refuge, they may still be the same as their previous selves, because the Dharma hasn't substantially benefited them. Therefore, the condensed transcendent wisdom says, the Dharma depends upon the spiritual teacher. Thus said the Buddha, the supreme embodiment of all good qualities. It was Buddha Shakyamuni, with perfect qualities and great compassion, not an ordinary person, who stressed the importance of being accepted by a qualified teacher. The Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, in 8,000 lines, also says, the bodhisattvas who stand on the stage of beginners, who with resolute intention have set out for the supreme enlightenment of a Buddha, they, the discerning, should, as good pupils intent on respect for their gurus, always tend their spiritual teachers, who are their good friends. The Flower Garland Sutra says, without a teacher, even the wise can't understand the Dharma. Why? Because the Buddha's teachings are vast, with numerous transmissions covering a wide range of topics. Without the guidance of a teacher's pith instructions, we would be unable to condense the essential points of all those teachings and put them into practice. I have been to big bookstores in Hong Kong and New York, where there is a great variety of Buddhist books, including texts related to Mahayana, Theravada, Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, and so on, and I got easily lost among the bookshelves. Each book looked very interesting to me, but I could not buy all of them, so it was really hard to choose which books to buy. Take the Tripitaka, for example. Many different versions of the canon exist throughout the world, containing an enormous variety of texts. The Qianlong Tripitaka contains an aggregate of 724 sets, which is divided into two parts: the main Tripitaka, 485 sets, and the sequel, 239 sets. The famous Yongle South Tripitaka and Yongle North Tripitaka each contains 636 volumes. The Taisho Tripitaka, which is now widely circulated, contains 100 volumes, with 55 volumes belonging to the main Tripitaka, 30 volumes to the sequel, and 15 volumes to the supplement. The Tibetan Tripitaka contains over 100 volumes of sutras in the Kangyur and over 200 volumes of shastras in the Tengyur. In addition, there are also numerous works by great Tibetan masters, and some masters alone have written nearly 100 volumes. At first glance at these Buddhist texts, a beginner may feel totally confused, not knowing which one to choose. Such a person might wonder, is it better to choose texts from the first turning of the Dharma wheel, the second, or the third? Should I choose texts from Theravada Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, or Tibetan Buddhism? After receiving a teacher's pith instructions, a Buddhist will know how to condense the essential points of all these Buddha's teachings. Specifically, a Buddhist should first generate renunciation, then cultivate bodhicitta, and lastly realize non-duality or emptiness. In Sutrayana, the wisdom of non-duality is described in the doctrine of the middle way, while in Vajrayana, it refers to the essence of the mind, with the mind being self-luminous and self-cognizing. In a nutshell, a Mahayanist's practice is to establish renunciation and bodhicitta as the foundation, and then to negate the self of the individual and the self of phenomena. This summarizes the essential points of all the Buddha's teachings. If you follow these points on the path, you'll have a perfect practice. Therefore, the teacher's instructions are very important. Without instructions, you may not even consider taking refuge. And even if you've already taken refuge, you may end up heading nowhere because it is extremely difficult to study Dharma on your own. I often think this: had I not been accepted as a disciple by the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, I might not have taken ordination to be a monk. And even if I had otherwise become a monk, maybe I would be no different from those monastics whose appearance is noble, but whose minds are no different from those worldly persons who know nothing about the Dharma. Therefore, I am very grateful to the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche. Please understand that the teacher's pith instructions are very important. As already said, without those instructions, we will never know how to condense the essential points of all the Buddha's teachings and integrate them into our practice. Therefore, neither having the Dharma nor taking refuge is sufficient in itself. We must also be accepted by a qualified teacher. The precious garland of precepts says, "Not knowing the doctrine, a 60-year-old is still a child." This means that a 60-year-old who took refuge but who doesn't know the doctrine is no different from a child. To understand the doctrine, one must follow a teacher. According to the Vinaya, a disciple who hasn't fully mastered the 3 Pitakas must follow a teacher for 10 years. After that, if the disciple has mastered the teachings, they may leave the teacher and start propagating the Dharma elsewhere. If the disciple hasn't, they need to continue following the teacher. But this is not the case anymore. It happens nowadays that as long as a teacher shaves a prospective monk's or nun's head and accepts him or her as a disciple, the person may be gone the next day. Many people are like this. They travel to Larungar from afar, insisting on having me as their guru. But after I give them ordination, they say, "Thank you, bye-bye," and leave the next day. They've never planned to follow a teacher to study Dharma. For them, following a teacher is simply a formality. In fact, a disciple should follow the teacher for a long time. Within secular education, a a Chinese student needs to participate in the 9-year compulsory education to finish primary and secondary education. In comparison, if a Dharma student doesn't participate in the 9-year Buddhist education, he cannot be qualified as a true Buddhist. Not only do we need basic education in the Dharma, but more importantly, we shouldn't depart from the teacher untimely. Some steady practitioners at Larungar have been here for nearly 20 years, diligently engaging in hearing, contemplation, and meditation on a daily basis. I really rejoice in them. Without staying in a dharmic environment for a long time, ordinary people's bad habits can easily surface. Thus, it is not a good idea if you just spend a few days in a Dharma center or stay with a teacher briefly and then leave for somewhere else. It is said that the Dzogchen lineage masters Vimalamitra and Nana Sutra reincarnated 500 times as Panditas. Nevertheless, they served and followed their guru for 9 and 21 years, respectively. If great masters like these appeared to follow a teacher for so many years, then we ordinary people with heavy karmic debts, who might have just been reborn from hell, or the Preta realm, must appreciate even more the rare and precious opportunity to follow a teacher. The process of following a teacher may be a bit challenging and tiring, but we must know that studying the Dharma doesn't only include easy moments, so please be patient. At Larungar, when a Dharma student with good grades, pure precepts, and virtuous character wants to leave, I normally dissuade them. Someone thought I had personal agendas, so he said to me, "Well, I can come back later to assist with your Dharma activities. Is it then okay if I leave now?" In fact, I didn't want to keep him at Larungar because I wanted him to work for me. I am only concerned that a beginner Buddhist like him, whether a householder or a monastic, cannot help but easily regress to the previous state of greed, anger, and ignorance once he returns to worldly life. Therefore, it is very important that you don't depart from a qualified teacher untimely. The Flower Garland Sutra contains extensive instructions on how to follow a teacher in the chapter called Entry into the Realm of Reality. These instructions are quite the same as the pith instructions in the Tantras. For example, when Sudhana studied under Manjushri, he was told by the Bodhisattva, "As to the skillful means employed by a qualified spiritual teacher, do not find faults," which is exactly the same as the pure perception of the Guru in Vajrayana. In another example, when Sudhana visited Avalokiteshvara, he was thinking, "Qualified spiritual teachers are Buddhas. Qualified spiritual teachers are the Dharma clouds of all truths. Qualified spiritual teachers are the treasury of all virtues." This is also consistent with the tantric teaching of seeing the Guru as a Buddha, as the root of Dharma, and as the source of virtues. Therefore, it is not just Vajrayana that advocates that Guru practice is everything in one's Dharma practice. To attain the highest state of enlightenment, following a Guru is indispensable. Someone thinks, "After leaving my Guru, I will be free and will have the chance to achieve something." Such a thought is no different from that of a truant kid, thinking, "After skipping school, I can buy a nice toy and have a wonderful time." In fact, such thinking is quite naive. A practitioner can only benefit from following a guru for a sufficiently long time. Here is a story about Venerable Atisha, which explains the importance of receiving a guru's teaching and being taken under their care. When Atisha was in India, Tara appeared to him vividly in a dream and told him, "I hope you can go to the snowland as soon as possible. Your 3 main disciples, who had an affinity with you from a previous life, are waiting for you there. They are emanations of the 3 main bodhisattvas. Accepting them as disciples will help with propagating the Dharma." The 3 disciples were known as Ku, Ngok, and Drom, or more formally, Kun Sondru Yungdrung, 1011 to 1075, Ngok Lekpa Sherab, and Drom Tampa Gyalwe Jungne. Later, Atisha came to Tibet to spread the Dharma. Dramtampa asked him questions, and Atisha's answers were compiled into the text titled The Dialogues with the Lineage Master. Kutan and Ngok also asked questions, and the answers were compiled into the Dialogues with the Disciples. The two sets of texts, which are collectively known as the Kadampa Dialogues, contain pith instructions on mind training that are as supreme as those in Drakar Lobsang Palden's Precious Garland of Mountain Practices and Chengawa Lodra Gyaltsen's Gateway to Training the Mind. The dialogues also explain the affinity between Atisha and his three main disciples, Ku, Ngok, and Drom, in their previous lives. I meant to translate the dialogues a long time ago, but couldn't spare the time, so I have put this translation project aside for now. About 20 years ago, I visited Pungugan Monastery in Barkum to teach the Sangha of over 20 monks during the summer retreat. After finishing teaching for the entire morning, in the afternoons I would take the two dialogues and go read in a nearby forest. Back then, I had only been a monk for a few years, and my renunciation was very strong. I had great confidence in the deeds of Atisha and Dramtampa. Now, whenever I pass by the monastery and the forest, I feel very joyful. The two sets of dialogues are indeed very good. As some senior Sangha members may remember, the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often quoted from the texts and told us inspiring stories about the wondrous affinity between Atisha and his three disciples. Atisha had many disciples in the span of his life. When he came to Tibet, in the area of Kham, his main disciples were Ku, Ngok, and Dram. In the area of Utsang, his main disciples included Lotsawa Rinchen Zangpo, Lotsawa Nakso Lotsawa Tsoltrim, and Jangchub O. In Nepal, Atisha also had quite a few great disciples. In India, he had many Panditas as his disciples. In Tibet, Atisha primarily propagated the Dharma with Dramtunpa and other main disciples, and their Dharma activities were very successful. Now, after so many years, their teachings and pith instructions, albeit short, still have a great effect on our minds. Once, three disciples of Jowo Atisha, Ku, Ngok, and Dram, asked him, "When it comes to attaining liberation and complete omniscience, which is more important, the canonical scriptures and their commentaries or the teacher's oral instructions?" "The teacher's instructions," Atisha replied. "Why?" "Even if you can explain the entire Tripitaka from memory and possess all the knowledge of metaphysics, it is only through the teacher's practical guidance that you can truly put the teachings into practice. Without this guidance, you will inevitably become separated from the path of the Dharma," Atisha answered. Academic scholars or debaters specializing in Buddhist logic can clearly explain Buddhist terms, including form, five aggregates, and more. However, if they lack the teacher's pith instructions, even if they speak eloquently, they have no idea where to start when it comes to doing the practice. Recently, the Larungar Sangha had a 20-day retreat. For those members who had rarely meditated in the past, sitting at home alone every day was very challenging. A master of Buddhist philosophy told me, "Teaching is easy for me, but meditating is hard. I have no problem teaching the topic of Buddhist logic or the text of Ornament of Clear Realization, but when I was in retreat, I found myself incapable of practicing well. Alas, I have been teaching the Dharma for years, but I don't know how to practice well. How embarrassing." We should be learned in the Dharma, but when it comes to combining the doctrine with the mind, we must rely on the teacher's instructions. Otherwise, given the vast number of canonical scriptures and their commentaries, it is impossible for a Buddhist to practice all of them one by one in this life. Without the teacher's practical guidance, the Dharma and the practitioner will part company. With the teacher's guidance, the Dharma will permeate into the practitioner's mind, enabling them to know how to practice accordingly. For example, when the teaching in the words of my perfect teacher has permeated the practitioner, they will clearly know how to generate bodhicitta at the beginning, how to meditate, and how to dedicate the merit in the end. Therefore, the teacher's instructions are essential. Let's now return to the dialogues between Atisha and his 3 disciples. So, they continued, is the essence of the teacher's instructions to uphold the 3 vows and to strive to do good with body, speech, and mind at all times. That is not a sufficient summary, Atisha replied. How can that be? They exclaimed. Atisha answered, you may be able to perfectly uphold the 3 vows, but if you haven't generated disenchantment with samsara, it just creates further causes for remaining in samsara. You may strive day and night to do good with your body, speech, and mind, but if you do not know how to dedicate the merit to perfect enlightenment, all your merit can be completely destroyed by your wrong thoughts. For example, someone may strive to do good with their body, speech, and mind. Such a person may prostrate and meditate every day and rarely leave the shrine room. They may constantly recite the names of Buddhas, the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, and the Diamond Sutra. Greed, anger, and ignorance may rarely arise in their mind. Such a person may come to Larungar for a Dharma assembly and take a 1-month retreat to recite the name of Buddha Amitabha 1 million times. In these ways, they have always been striving to do good. However, on the way back home, this person might become very angry and quarrel with their Vajra brother, even resorting to physical violence. In this case, any previously undedicated merit, including what was accumulated through diligent practice during the 1-month retreat, will be completely lost. Nowadays, many people do not comprehend that their positive actions should be guided by bodhicitta and that the merit should be dedicated in the end. Even if they have been practicing diligently, retreating, meditating, and engaging in other ascetic practices, a burst of negative thoughts and emotions can destroy the yet-to-be-dedicated merit. Not only is the merit lost, but more negative actions are likely to be committed. In comparison, when we have the teacher's practical guidance, we will engage in good deeds with bodhicitta as the motivation and dedicate the merit in the end. It is like when you finally make some money, you will lock the cash in a safe when you are away or deposit it in a bank. Similarly, if you dedicate the merit accumulated by your good deeds, it won't be exhausted until your attainment of enlightenment. This is very important, but sadly, many people don't know this. Atisha continued, you may possess extraordinary intelligence, pure percepts, the ability to teach, meditative insights, and more. But if you haven't renounced the 8 worldly concerns, whatever you do will only be for this present life, and you will not find the path that helps for future lives. Why can some people succeed in their practice? It's primarily because they have renounced this life, placed little importance on fame and wealth, and single-mindedly pursued liberation. By contrast, some practitioners may seem to study the Dharma well, but will fail miserably in their practice due to their attachment to worldly concerns. There are such Dharma teachers at Larungar as well. Well, no group can be 100% perfect. The above analysis illustrates the importance of being taken under the care of a teacher. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we cannot generate true renunciation, which renders keeping the 3 vows of little use to our liberation. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we don't know how to practice within the context of bodhicitta, which renders striving to do good of little effect. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we don't know we should pursue liberation, which renders the results of our discipline and learning nothing but worldly blessings. However, many people don't understand this. They spend their whole lives reading numerous Buddhist texts but remain confused at the end. For example, after reading many sutras, a leading figure of modern Chinese literature named Longchen felt that some sutras were so supreme that he donated money to print more copies. It is a great pity that Longchen have true pith instructions. Otherwise, with his intelligence, he would have gained a more profound understanding of the sutras. I have even written articles describing the links that renowned writers and celebrities have had with Buddhism. Many famous persons lack a teacher's instructions, so they've simply established an affinity with Buddhism. We should know that the key to the profound pith instructions in Buddhism is only in a teacher's hand. Without the teacher opening the treasure door, you can only have a quick glance at the outside without getting the essence inside. As it is said in a Shastra, to achieve complete omniscience, one must follow a qualified teacher. If only studying diligently on one's own, no one can attain Buddhahood. It's like a blind person cannot climb a high mountain all by himself. Although there are self-taught persons in the arenas of worldly knowledge and skills, becoming a self-taught practitioner is impossible in Buddhism, as the teacher's pith instructions are indispensable. Attaining realization through self-guided practice is as hard as scaling the blue sky. Of course, a qualified teacher is not necessarily a person. Many people complain that they cannot find the right teacher to follow. One person even told me, "I have been searching for years, but I haven't found a suitable teacher for me." If you are unable to find a right person as your teacher, you can always consider the words of my perfect teacher as your guide, as it is considered an imperturbable instructor. While a teacher, whether of the past or the present, may occasionally become upset, making it difficult to follow them, the words of my perfect teacher will never be mad at you. Therefore, you can pray to it and consult its text at any time. The above teaching has covered all the freedoms and advantages. We should carefully examine our own lives and circumstances to see which freedom or advantage is present and which of them is not. If we find that all of them are present, we have what is known as human life endowed with the 18 freedoms and advantages. If we only possess some of them, we should appreciate what we already have and strive to attain what we do not yet have.